Hello, I'm Anneke, clinical psychologist. I have another 5 minutes with Errol Musk, the famous Elon Musk's father. This time I want to ask a bit more personal question. Errol, can you reflect on what men want from a woman?
What men want from women.
Yes.
You mean as a
So,
partner?
yes, as a selection.
Um, yes, it's a very topical question. Strangely enough, I was looking at something like this by chance the other day, and I saw this article, and they spoke about this, and I recall that I was quite interested to read that generally men want three things in a woman, or rather, they had a survey of what men want in a woman, and the results of the survey in this article, um, I think it was from the United States, I think so, um, was that men want three things in a woman. And the questions were also aimed at women, and the woman wanted 300 things in a man. so, so, so that was quite funny, and I read it, and I had a quick look at this, and I realized, yeah, this is really true. This is really true, and especially with today's women, and I was I was taken aback by it myself. Um, I mean, the first thing, as I recall, that a man wants from a woman is to be highly attracted to her. He wants to be highly, highly attracted to her, to the point of absolutely adoring her. He wants that. He wants to be very, very highly attracted to her. And I'm trying to remember what the other things might be. Oh, yes, I do recall that he wants a woman who shares his goals in life, his passions and his goals. That obviously can wind up to be a bit selfish, because what he really also wants is her time. Her time must be spent with him, and not on her career. Men do not give a darn what a woman's career is. Uh, so, unless it's some sort of strange setup where the woman is, has hundreds of millions or something, and the man is drawn to that. I mean, that can happen. but what I'm saying is, it's the average sort of woman career thing that men could give a darn what your career is. So they want you to share their passion and their goal, and to be actually the power behind their passion and their goal, which is where the famous saying comes from. The really famous saying comes from, and that behind every really successful man is a woman. There's no doubt about that. And I know they've made twists on that, but generally the original saying is exactly that. Behind every successful man, there has been a woman. And yeah, so it also amounts to the woman giving her time and her space and everything to the man. And that is what a man wants. So he wants, the second thing that a man wants is the woman to share his goals. Um, you want to know the third one? The third one, um, well, I would say that at all levels, a man would like praise from the woman that he has. Approval, I think, is a better word. Approval. So even if he is a dustbin collector, or a janitor, or somebody who works in the most simple things, he would like her approval. and he would like to have praise from her for that. And I think if a man has those three things, um, that he is very attracted to her, that she shares his goals, and that she respects him, or rather approves of him, I think a man can never be happier. When it comes to women, I was surprised to see the things that a woman wants from a man. Now, I can't remember the list, but it's an extremely long list. And it goes on and on, compassion, sympathy, empathy, kindness, it just doesn't end. It just goes on and on. Shares, gives his time, is always there for her. The list just goes on and on and on and on and on. And there's about 300. And it's really unrealistic. It's very unrealistic. But if they stuck to the three things that a man wants, we'd have far less problems in the world today. We have a situation today where I suppose I wouldn't be wrong in saying 80% of young women are chasing 20% of the young men. And that 20% of the young men are the sort of fancy, square-chinned, I think the word they use is Chad, sort of a Chad. He's like, and so they only make up maybe even less than 20% of men. And 80% of women are sort of after those men, and they neglect the other 80% of men. And the result is a great deal of disappointment from the woman, because they are not being realistic. And another thing that has caused a great deal of difficulty in the world is the breakup of relationships. Relationships, I'm told now, I'm not an expert at all, but I'm told that 70% of marriages break up very, very within a few years, and I know that a while back they spoke about 50%, but now it's 70%, and the reasons for this have a lot to do with, I suppose, the media's portrayal of what an ideal existence should be and so forth. And women are much more, I think, I'm just surmising, into the media's magazines, reading these articles and so on, and they think back to this Chad that they should rather have had, and in reality, the Chads are just ordinary people like anybody else, and quite often when a woman does land a Chad, she's quite surprised to find that he also only wants those three things that I mentioned earlier. But liberal politics started to make its fall in the late 70s. And prior to that, it was almost impossible to meet a divorcee or divorcee, someone who's divorced. Nobody was divorced. So it was almost strange, I'm able to say, because I got married in 1970, that you seldom met anyone who was divorced. And certainly before that, when I was with my parents, I don't recall ever meeting anyone that my parents told me is divorced. And of course I was, I'm talking about when I was a teenager, and I knew a little bit more about what life is about. But I never met or heard of anyone who was divorced. And then in 1979, liberal politics came up with another one of their inane, what I call, ideas, and that was that you no longer needed to give a reason to divorce. You could simply say that you cite irreconcilable differences. Now, before that, you could not get divorced without providing the court, and I'm not even talking about the Catholic countries because they certainly didn't allow divorce at all. But in the Protestant, let's say, countries, you had to give a good reason. Now, you couldn't go into court and say that I no longer love my husband, or before 1979, or my husband does this, or my husband does that, because the judge would say, well, you were with him for 2 years or so, maybe more even, before you were married, and you've been together now for quite a while, a number of years, and now suddenly you find him incompatible, or you find him not to your liking, which the judge would not consider a suitable grounds for divorce. And Holland, fortunately, one place I can recall, Holland, in 1979, when this law came out, at least did one thing. They said, all right, you can get divorced on the basis of irreconcilable differences, but only after 2 years. You must go home, and in 2 years' time you can come back, and if you still feel that way, then you can get your irreconcilable differences divorce. And I think that was a very sensible thing to do, because I would imagine that 90% of those people never came back for a divorce. So we sit today in a world where women are not getting married because at the right ages that they should get married, which I think is in the early 20s, which when they're most suitable to start being mothers and so on. I mean, my wife and I married when she was 22, and my second wife was married when she was 19, and they both had 3 children by the time they were 25. Now we have women who are in their late 20s and early 30s, who to a large extent behave like 21-year-olds. Now, looks go, looks fade. So the men that they want when they're at that age, can get a girl in their early 20s, the girl's early 20s. Why would such a man want a girl who's in her 30s? And the woman can't understand this, and they belittle men because of that, and they accuse men of being all sorts of things, all sorts of bad things, because they don't see the value in them being that at that age. And I can remember that as a young boy, I remember a woman got married at the age of 28, and we all thought, gee, that's extraordinary. That, I mean, somebody of 28 is really on the shelf, and she's got married. Today there are millions, or thousands, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of young women beyond 28 who are still planning to have a marriage and planning to have a future with children. And a lot of the women don't realize that, in fact, the cutoff period for having children, certainly your first child, is 35. Because beyond 35, many, many tests are needed to ensure that it will be a healthy birth. And so the whole situation at the moment is not very good for these women. And the women who do separate from their husbands simply on the basis of suddenly irreconcilable differences sometimes have children. And they will not find another man very eager to take on a 30-year-old woman plus 31, 32, 40, and so on, with children, for obvious reason. The other thing is that has happened through the application of inane liberal ideas is that when a man and woman divorce, the man, first of all, divorce is a catastrophe, a financial catastrophe for a family. It's a financial catastrophe. And the courts inevitably award virtually everything to the woman, so that the man loses, depending on the stage that he's at in life, loses his home, probably his vehicle, his children. He loses everything. He loses half his salary, maybe even half his pension. He's put in a position where he can never ever really marry again. Because I'm talking about most men. There are a few perhaps that make a lot of money and can carry on, but generally speaking, the modern man today looks at it and says, well, if I'm going to get married, I'm very likely to wind up with the 70% divorce rate, out on the street with everything I've worked for in a few years taken away from me. And my wife might well be with another man that I'm keeping while I live in some single room in a boarding house. And so men have woken up to this, and I think it is it's almost like an epidemic. It's not a small thing. It's something that's happening in all the Western countries. In fact, the Eastern countries, or rather you might say 2/3 of the world's population, think that the Western world, as you might call it, has gone off its head and has lost all sort of direction because of the things that they are doing. Because in those communities, they don't do divorces on the basis of irreconcilable differences and such like. And of course, Catholic community does not allow divorce, and you might say, why? Good reason for it. They thought they've been doing that. They've been there for 1,500 years, so they know what divorce means. And at the end of the day, of course, it's the children that are going to, not only the man but the woman, the children will have to face financial catastrophe. So I don't know how we got onto this subject, but I think it was to do with what do men want from a woman.
Yeah, but it is nice, Errol, to have the 5 minutes with the free flow of Errol Musk on women and relationships. Thank you, Errol.
Oh, it's a pleasure.